They thought surviving one night inside this house was easy, but what happened before sunrise was recorded in real reports, and some people never stayed the same again. I had always thought I was brave, but nothing could have prepared me for that night. Standing outside the old, decaying house, I felt a chill that wasn't just from the cold. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak of the floor under my feet echoed like a warning. I wondered if I had made a mistake, yet curiosity pushed me forward. What I experienced inside changed the way I think about fear, reality, and the unknown. This isn't just a story, I felt every heartbeat, every whisper, every shadow. Watch closely, because what I saw overnight was unlike anything you've imagined. If you want to see more real haunted stories and spine-chilling adventures, hit that subscribe button and join the journey. 1 Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Kentucky, USA. I had always been drawn to abandoned places, the kind that carry stories of people long gone. Waverly Hills Sanatorium was one of those places I had read about countless times, and something in me told me I had to see it for myself. The building loomed as I approached it, its silhouette cutting against the dark Kentucky sky. I parked my car and stepped out, the cold wind biting through my jacket. Immediately, a sense of unease settled over me, but curiosity pushed me forward. As I walked up the cracked steps, the heavy doors groaned when I pushed them open. The smell hit me first, a mix of mold, decay, and something else I couldn't quite place. It was suffocating, but I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was there. I had to experience it, to see the truth behind the countless stories of ghosts and strange sounds. Every step inside echoed through the empty halls, the sound bouncing off walls that had once held hundreds of patients. The main corridor was lined with doors on either side, some hanging loosely on their hinges, some closed tightly as if to keep something in. I could almost feel the history pressing down on me. I passed rooms where beds had long been removed, yet the floorboards creaked under my weight in a way that made me feel like I wasn't alone. I told myself it was just the building settling, but my gut said otherwise. A sudden chill ran down my spine, and I caught myself looking over my shoulder, though nothing was there. I reached the staircase leading to the upper floors, the air growing colder with each step. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. I paused on the landing, heart pounding, and listened. At first, there was silence, then a faint whisper, almost like someone calling a name. My mind tried to rationalize it, but the feeling of being watched was undeniable. I pushed on, each step heavier than the last, feeling as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. On the top floor, the windows were mostly broken, letting in a pale, moonlit glow that barely illuminated the peeling walls. I sat on the edge of an old stairwell, trying to gather my thoughts. I thought about the patients who had spent their final days here, many alone, many in pain. The weight of their presence was overwhelming, yet it was also strangely peaceful. For a moment, I felt connected to the stories I had only read about, as if the building itself was sharing its memories with me. As I made my way back down, the whispers seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of my own footsteps. I exited the building with a sense of awe and a lingering unease. Waverly Hills had not disappointed, it was terrifying, humbling, and haunting all at once. I left knowing that no photograph or story could ever fully capture the experience of being there. I had felt it, lived it, and it would stay with me long after I drove away into the night. 2 The Winchester Mystery House, California, USA. I had been fascinated by the Winchester Mystery House ever since I first saw pictures of it online. The sprawling mansion, with its endless staircases and doors to nowhere, looked like it belonged in a nightmare. When I finally arrived in San Jose, California, I could feel my heart racing as I approached the entrance. The air was heavy, almost still, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the labyrinthine structure. I parked my car and stepped out, taking a deep breath to steady myself before walking up to the massive wooden door. Inside, the house was even more confusing than I had imagined. Every hallway seemed to twist and turn, leading to rooms that didn't make sense. Some doors opened into walls, staircases ended abruptly on ceilings, and windows looked out into other rooms. I could feel a strange energy in the air, like the house itself was alive, watching me move from room to room. Each creak of the floorboards echoed through the empty halls, making me jump every time. I told myself it was just the old building, but a shiver ran down my spine that I couldn't shake. As I explored, I imagined the story of Sarah Winchester, the widow who had built this house endlessly. She believed the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles haunted her, and that continuous construction was the only way to appease them. Thinking about her, I felt a strange connection, almost like I could feel her anxiety and desperation echoing through the walls. I paused in one long corridor, the sun setting outside, and noticed how the shadows stretched across the room like dark fingers, reaching for me. My stomach tightened, and I realized I was truly alone in this maze, with nothing but my own thoughts to guide me. In one room, I found a spiral staircase that led nowhere but the ceiling. I climbed cautiously, each step groaning under my weight. Reaching the top, I could see the other floors below, a confusing puzzle of hallways and doors. It was dizzying, and for a moment, I felt disoriented, unsure of where I had come from or where I was going next. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant creak of the building settling. I imagined the countless nights Sarah must have spent wandering these halls, building and rebuilding, never stopping, never resting. It was haunting and mesmerizing all at once. As I made my way back toward the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had walked through more than just an old mansion. I had walked through someone's fears, their obsessions, and their relentless attempt to control the unseen. The Winchester Mystery House wasn't just a building. It was a living memory of a woman haunted by loss and guilt. Stepping outside, the evening air felt colder, sharper, as if the house itself had whispered something to me. I left with a mix of awe, unease, and a strange respect for the story the walls carried, knowing I would never forget the night I wandered through its impossible corridors. 3 Crescent Hotel, Eureka Springs, Arkansas, USA. I had heard so many stories about the Crescent Hotel that I could hardly sleep the night before I visited. They called it, America's Most Haunted Hotel, and I wanted to see if the legends were true. Driving up the winding roads to Eureka Springs, I could feel my excitement mixing with nervousness. The building rose ahead of me, grand and elegant, but with an unmistakable air of decay. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the walls, and I parked my car, feeling a strange flutter in my chest. I knew stepping inside would be different from anything I had experienced before. As I walked through the front doors, the scent of old wood and polish hit me first, mixed with a faint mustiness from the unused corners. The lobby was vast and silent, the sunlight falling softly through the tall windows. Each step I took echoed through the hall, reminding me how empty the place felt despite its grandeur. I passed the long corridors, lined with doors to rooms that held countless stories, some tragic, some mysterious. My imagination ran wild, picturing the people who had walked these halls before me, some checking in and never leaving in the same way they came. I explored the staircases, noting the intricate woodwork and the way shadows pooled in the corners. Every now and then, I would hear a soft creak or a distant thud, making my pulse quicken. I kept telling myself it was the hotel settling, but a part of me knew it was more than that. There was a weight to the air, a presence that made me feel watched. I paused at the top floor, looking down the long corridor stretching ahead, imagining the countless stories of guests who had felt the same unease I did. It was unsettling, but I couldn't turn back yet. In one of the rooms, I noticed small details that made my skin crawl, a chair slightly out of place, a mirror reflecting shadows that weren't mine. I remembered reading about a guest who had reported a woman in old-fashioned clothing appearing in the hallways, and suddenly, I felt a chill. My mind raced with possibilities, but I kept moving forward, documenting every feeling, every sound. The hotel seemed to breathe with its own rhythm, a place alive with memory and mystery. It was thrilling and terrifying all at once. By the time I stepped outside into the fading sunlight, I realized the Crescent Hotel was more than just a building. It held the stories, fears, and whispers of hundreds of people who had come before me. The experience left me with a lingering unease and awe, knowing that no photograph or video could ever capture the true essence of being there. I drove away slowly, my heart still racing, and with every mile, I could feel the presence of the hotel lingering, a quiet reminder of the history and spirits it carried within its walls. That night, the Crescent Hotel stayed with me, haunting my thoughts in the way only a truly haunted place can. For Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, West Virginia, USA. I had always been drawn to the kind of places most people avoid, but nothing had prepared me for the sheer scale of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. As I approached the massive stone structure, the sun was already low, casting long shadows across the overgrown grounds. The air was heavy, thick with silence and the scent of decaying leaves. Parking my car, I felt my chest tighten, not out of fear alone, but anticipation. I knew this was going to be unlike any other place I had explored. Walking up the main steps, I noticed the walls scarred and weathered by time, the windows either broken or boarded up. Pushing the door open, a cold gust of air met me, carrying a smell of damp and dust that seemed to cling to my clothes. My footsteps echoed through the vast halls, each creak of the floorboards sounding unnaturally loud in the emptiness. I stopped for a moment, listening, feeling as if the building itself were aware of my presence, almost watching me move. The hallways were endless, lined with heavy doors that had once contained patients. I imagined the countless lives that had passed through here, many of them suffering, some lost to the dark corners of the mind. I could almost hear whispers, fragments of conversations carried by the wind through broken windows. My stomach twisted, but I pressed forward, determined to see and feel every part of this place. Each room told its own story, peeling paint, rusted beds, and chains that hinted at the fear and control once exercised here. Climbing the stairs to the upper floors, the temperature dropped noticeably, my breath visible in the dim light of my flashlight. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching and shifting as if alive. I paused at the top, looking down a hallway where the walls seemed to close in, and felt a sudden vertigo. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, but there was nothing there. Just the weight of the building, the history it carried, and my own racing thoughts. It was overwhelming, the mix of fascination and dread growing with every step I took. In one of the larger rooms, I leaned against a wall, trying to steady my shaking hands. I thought about the patients who had lived and died here, some abandoned by the world, some driven to despair by their illnesses. The air seemed to hum with their memories, a tangible presence that I could not ignore. Every creak of the floor and whisper of wind amplified the feeling that I was intruding on something sacred and tragic. I took a deep breath and slowly made my way back toward the exit, every step heavy with the weight of what I had just experienced. Emerging into the fading light outside, I felt a strange relief, but also a lingering unease. The asylum had not only tested my courage but had left an impression on my mind and soul. The stories I had read before visiting now felt alive, and the building had shared its history with me in a way no book or photo ever could. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the imposing structure looming closer, a reminder that some places leave a mark long after you leave them. 5 Poveglia Island, Italy. I had always been fascinated by islands with dark histories, but nothing had prepared me for Poveglia. The first time I saw it from the water, its silhouette looked more like a fortress than a place anyone could live. The sky was gray, the wind cold and sharp, and the waves against the boat's hull seemed almost to whisper warnings. As we approached, I felt my chest tighten, a mix of excitement and dread. This was the island that people called the most haunted place in the world, and I was about to step foot on it myself. The dock was crumbling, uneven, and wet with the constant spray of the lagoon. As soon as I stepped onto the island, the air changed, it felt heavier, almost as if the history of suffering itself was pressing down on me. Every building I passed was abandoned, decaying under years of neglect. The hospital structures loomed like skeletal giants, their broken windows staring out like empty eyes. I could almost hear the echoes of patients' cries, the stories of the sick and the doomed that had lingered here for generations. My flashlight cut through the gloom, but the darkness seemed to move with me, swallowing each step I took. I wandered through the corridors, noting the peeling walls and rusted gates. I imagined the doctors and nurses who had walked these halls, and the patients who had been brought here, many never to leave. The stories I had read about forced quarantines, isolation, and unimaginable suffering replayed in my mind as I walked, and for a moment, I felt a deep sadness, almost a guilt, for intruding into this place. Every creak of the floorboards under my feet sounded like a whisper, warning me to leave, but I pressed on, needing to see everything for myself. Climbing a set of outdoor steps, I reached the top of a small tower overlooking the island. From there, the view was eerie. The dense overgrowth, the ruined buildings, and the lagoon surrounding it all made it look like the edge of the world. I felt a chill run down my spine, imagining the countless souls who had lived, suffered, and died here. The isolation was complete, the cries of the present were only my own heartbeat and the wind rattling the broken structures. It was hauntingly quiet, yet every shadow seemed alive, ready to move if I looked away for a second. As I made my way back to the dock, the sun began to set, casting long, strange shadows across the ruins. I turned for one last look, and for a brief second, it felt as though the island itself was watching me, marking me as a visitor who had seen too much. The journey back across the water was silent, and I couldn't shake the feeling that a part of me had stayed behind with the stories and memories of Poveglia. That night, I lay awake thinking about the island, knowing that some places are more than locations, they are living reminders of human suffering, and Poveglia is one of the darkest of all.